Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we continue the heartfelt and challenging journey of single mother lythica and Officer Hùng, a man who has quietly protected her with all his heart. In the previous episodes, as many of you have seen, lythica was cruelly attacked and thrown into the river under the cover of night. But fate hadn't abandoned her just yet. A fisherman and his child discovered her just in time and saved her life. Though her memories remain scattered in the haze of unconsciousness, there are moments when her eyes shimmer, as if searching for something familiar. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hùng, a quiet man with a deep heart, continues to follow every clue, every small trace left at the scene. Time may pass, the trail may fade, but he has never once given up hope of finding the woman he's loved in silence all along. Will the intuition of the heart lead them back to each other? Will lythica's memory return before the wounds of the past bury everything in oblivion? And will Hùng be able to overcome every obstacle to reunite lythica and her child in a peaceful home? All will begin to unfold in today's episode. Join us as we follow this emotional journey together. As soon as Hùng received the call from his superior, he rushed to the station. On the desk lay the freshly delivered forensic report, a single sheet of paper, yet it weighed heavily on his heart. The blood sample found on the wooden stick near the riverbank had been confirmed to match lythica's DNA. There was no more doubt, she had been assaulted right at the scene. Strands of tangled hair found clinging to the stick also matched samples taken from her comb. Each detail felt like a cold blade driven straight into Hùng chest, an ache that was equal parts sorrow and fury. The original suspect list included 30 individuals. But after cross-checking records, analyzing testimonies, and tracking geolocation data, the investigation team had narrowed it down to 10 suspects, all of whom had been seen near the riverbank around the time of the incident. Hùng superior, his face grave, ordered the full deployment of forces to conduct a comprehensive search along the river, believed to be the likely route the perpetrator took to dispose of lythica after the assault. However, the fingerprints on the weapon remained unidentifiable. Rain had washed away much of the evidence. The forensics unit was working around the clock, analyzing footage from nearby public cameras and extracting the remaining microscopic traces. Time was now their greatest enemy, and with each passing hour, a growing tightness gripped Hùng chest. He had never felt this helpless before. The woman he had given his whole heart to had vanished without a trace. She could be injured, frightened, or worse, lying somewhere, cold and alone, deep within the misty forest. But Hùng refused to give in. He had once made a vow to himself: if ever there came a day when lythica needed him most, no matter the cost, he would never abandon her. Outside of his duties at the station, Hùng spent time caring for baby Tony, the child still too young to speak, yet whose eyes welled up with tears each morning he awoke without his mother beside him. During the long nights, Tony would toss and turn, his tiny hands reaching instinctively for the familiar warmth that once lulled him to sleep. Hùng held the boy close, gently patting his back, offering every ounce of tenderness and patience he could muster. Once, while changing the baby's diaper, he found the tiny bracelet lythica had once placed on her child, lying next to the bed. The sight of it pierced his heart, bringing tears that fell silently down his face. Whatever tomorrow may bring, Hùng knew he could not afford delay. No clue, no matter how small, could be overlooked. And deep within his soul, a faint light still flickered, a whisper of instinct telling him that lythica was not truly gone. Somewhere out there, amidst the vast wilderness, she was waiting to be found. That morning, just as she returned from the market, lythica's foster mother overheard whispers from a group of vegetable sellers at the street corner. They were talking about a woman who had been assaulted and gone missing near the eastern stream, a case that had shaken the entire countryside. Though no names were mentioned, a chill ran down her spine. Her hands went limp, the basket of groceries slipped to the ground, and she didn't even bother to pick it up. A deep sense of dread crept in, an instinct only a mother who had spent years raising Hoai could understand. Something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, she jumped on her old bicycle and rode straight to the local police station. Her heart pounded wildly, whether from exhaustion or fear, she couldn't tell. When Hung stepped out of the meeting room, she rushed over, her voice hoarse from trying to contain her emotions. "Hung, please tell me the truth, is it Hoai?" Hung froze. His gaze darkened. Looking into the face of the aging woman in front of him, the one who had raised Hoai since childhood, who had cared for her as if she were her own, Hung knew there was no point in hiding it anymore. He bowed his head and gave a quiet nod. "It's been 5 days, we're doing everything we can to find her. Please believe me, I won't let this case go cold." At those words, Hoai's foster mother staggered back a step. She sank into a wooden bench in the hallway, tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. The image of her daughter's gentle smile, her pure eyes, the nightly texts asking about her day, all seemed to dissolve into a thick, dark fog. She had been wondering for days why her calls went unanswered, assuming she was just busy with the baby. But now... oh dear heavens, how could this happen? She just brought the little one to visit me last week. I thought she was just busy. I never imagined this. Hung remained silent, his heart tightening. For all these years, this woman had been the only family Hoai ever had. Every bedtime story, every comforting word, every bowl of rice porridge, came from these hands. Hung poured her a glass of water, but even his hands trembled, knowing that her pain was no less than his, perhaps even deeper. A while later, after regaining some composure, she looked up and met his eyes. "Focus all your strength on finding her. Leave Tony to me. I'll bring him home. He needs warmth, familiar hands, you shouldn't have to carry both burdens alone. But Tony is still so young, and you're not as strong as before. Let me arrange." "No need," she interrupted, her voice suddenly firm. "That child is my grandson. Hoai is my daughter. We may not share blood, but I raised her, she is my flesh and blood. They need me now. Tony needs me. If not now, then when?" Hung was choked up, unable to say another word. He simply nodded, a silent thank you that said more than words ever could. That afternoon, he carefully packed Tony's things, a box of milk formula, a few outfits, diapers, a small water bottle, and the faded stuffed bear Hoai had once lovingly chosen. When her foster mother arrived, she cradled the baby in her arms, holding him close, as if embracing the hollow part of her daughter's soul. Tony nestled into her shoulder, neither crying nor smiling, his eyes blank, like a small puzzle piece just torn from the home he once knew. From that moment on, Hung no longer had to rush home after every shift, no longer had to rock Tony to sleep amid reports and maps strewn across his desk. He could now throw himself fully into the search. Every muddy footprint, every old photo, every half-truth from a suspect, he combed through it all, like a man navigating darkness with only one final light, the belief that somewhere out there, Hoai was still alive, waiting to be brought home. Meanwhile, in a modest leaf-thatched hut at the edge of the forest, Hoai had lain motionless on a rickety bamboo bed for 5 long days. Her skin was pale, her breathing faint, and from time to time, her brow would furrow ever so slightly as pain crept into her unconscious mind. Though the fisherman and his mother had done everything they could, boiling herbs, applying medicinal leaves, even calling the local doctor, the situation was far from promising. After a thorough examination, the doctor sighed, shook his head, and left them with a chilling warning. "She has a serious brain injury. signs of internal bleeding. If she's not transferred to a hospital in time, there could be permanent damage, or worse, her life could be at risk. The young fisherman stood silently against the wall. His eyes were red, and he clenched his worn-out hat tightly in one hand. Never in his life had he seen someone lie so still for 5 days, yet still look hauntingly beautiful, fragile, cold, and delicate like morning dew clinging to a mountaintop. The stranger they had pulled from the river had now become a weight on his heart that he couldn't shake. She had no name, no words, no documents, no family, and yet, those closed eyes stirred something in him, something he couldn't ignore. That evening, he sat in a daze by the fire, watching his mother turn over a few pieces of dried sweet potato. The rain had started to seep through the leaf roof, and the only sounds inside the hut were the crackling of wood and the chorus of insects outside. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Ma, we should sell the cow. Take her to the district hospital. If we wait any longer, it might be too late." His mother spun around in shock, eyes wide. "Sell the cow? My God, we have nothing left. The fields are leased out, we're 3 harvests behind on the bank loan, and now you want to sell the last cow? That's our only asset, our seed to start over. But if we don't take her, she might never wake up." His voice cracked. "I can't just watch her lie there and do nothing." The mother said nothing. She wasn't heartless, far from it. She had been the one spooning porridge into the girl's mouth, changing her warm compresses, checking her fever with the back of her hand every day. But more than anyone, she understood the weight of their reality. A family with nothing but a leaking hut and a near-empty rice pot, selling their only cow would be cutting off the last thread of survival. The next day, a few concerned neighbors dropped by after hearing rumors. Everyone offered advice. Why not report it to the authorities? They'll help take her to the hospital, maybe track down her family. Keeping her here like this might lead to bigger trouble. You didn't do anything wrong, but no one knows who she really is. I know you're poor, but even saving a life needs to follow the rules, you know. But the mother just shook her head, her eyes never leaving the curtain shielding the frail body inside. We save her first. If she doesn't make it, what's the point of calling anyone? When she opens her eyes and can speak, we'll deal with everything. As long as she's breathing, there's still hope." The young man glanced at his mother, his hand still gripping the fabric bag that held their debt ledger and the birth certificate of the one remaining cow. Inside him raged a battle, between compassion, duty, and the gnawing hunger that stalked every meal. But deep down, he knew, if he had to sell it all, just to buy a chance for that girl to live, he would do it without regret. After nearly a week of pouring his heart and soul into the investigation, Hùng finally received a call from the forensic department. The 2 fingerprints found on the wooden stick at the scene had been matched. They belonged to 2 individuals with criminal records in the area. One of them was Chung, a known thug previously involved in hired assaults. Without wasting a second, Hùng led the tactical unit straight to the makeshift camp where Chung was known to frequent. The raid was swift. Chung was caught off guard, pinned down on the spot, his face pale with fear. Back at the station, after only a few hours of psychological pressure, he began to confess in disturbing detail. He said he had been hired by a man named Trong for 50 million dong to make the girl disappear from the area as soon as possible. Trong was the mastermind, Chung and another man, Nam, were just hired hands. That day, they had been lurking near the narrow path next to Hoi's house. As she stepped outside carrying her baby, Chung approached to ask for directions, while Nam crept up from behind and pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth over her mouth. It all happened in under a minute. Hoai collapsed unconscious and was loaded into a car waiting nearby. Following Trong's orders, they drove her to a secluded stream nearly 10 kilometers from the village. There, they dragged her out of the vehicle and beat her mercilessly to teach her a lesson. Chung vividly remembered her pale face, her eyes barely opened before being swallowed by the onslaught. Then, once she stopped moving, they lifted her limp body and threw her straight into the freezing water. I don't know if she's alive or dead now. It was dark that night, and the current was strong, but I'm pretty sure it was over, Chung muttered, eyes downcast as Hung pressed him for the truth. Later, the team also apprehended Nam, the accomplice, just as he returned to the area after days on the run. Nam confessed he had spent all his share of the money in just a few days of reckless indulgence. With nowhere else to go, he returned to his hometown, only to be arrested at the bus station. At the station, both men revealed further details. The man who hired them, Trong, had conducted communications via a landline and was closely connected to someone named Trung, who was believed to be the coordinator of logistics and movements. Though both Trung and Trung were still at large, their identities were confirmed, and an urgent nationwide manhunt was immediately launched. However, despite apprehending the two attackers and uncovering leads to the mastermind, Hoai's whereabouts remained a mystery. Chung swore that after dumping her in the river, they never went back. Whatever evidence was left had likely been washed away by the cold rushing water. This weighed heavily on Hung's mind. Though the case had made progress, the fear that Hoai might have been lost to the current, forever gone, pressed down on him relentlessly. He couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, lying broken in the cold night, alone, abandoned. The haunting image returned night after night in his dreams, like a verdict still waiting to be resolved. After obtaining Chung's confession that Hoai had been beaten and thrown into a secluded stream, Hung wasted no time. Alongside Du, his closest colleague and the one who understood him best, he set out at dawn, bringing with him topographic maps and the full case file on the upstream region of the eastern stream. As the first light of morning broke, they arrived at the location Chung had mentioned. The stream, still swollen and muddy from the previous night's rain, flowed rapidly. Du clung to the wild grasses along the banks. Hung waded through the shallow parts, flashlight in hand, scanning every tree root, every patch of eroded soil. A few steps away, Du swept his binoculars across the distant rock cliffs. For hours, the only sounds were the murmuring current and the wind slicing through the dense forest. Then suddenly, at a remote bend in the stream, Hung came to a halt. Ahead, on a large rock jutting out of the earth, lay dried bloodstains, faint but clearly once fresh, trickling down into the damp soil. Hidden just behind a thick clump of grass was an old woven fishing basket, soaked with water, still carrying faint traces of fish scales and crushed forest leaves. Hung froze. He knelt down, gently peeling back the grass, his hands trembling. Du hurried over, gave him a nod, and carefully collected the blood sample for analysis. They exchanged a glance, no words spoken, but in both their hearts, a fragile flicker of hope ignited. If that really is Hoai's blood, then she might still be alive, Du murmured, struggling to keep his voice steady. Hung stared at the stream, winding beneath the pale morning sun, his voice hoarse. That blood was fresh just a day ago. And this fishing basket, there's no way it belonged to them. If they dumped a body, they wouldn't have left something like this behind. And if she had been swept away, we'd have found a body by now. But 5 days have passed, and there's nothing. Could it be, someone saved her? The thought injected new energy into both men. However slim the chance, any sign that Hoai might still be alive was like a light breaking through endless night. The basket, a tool only local fishermen used, suggested someone from the nearby villages. Maybe someone had passed by and found her. Maybe she was still alive, being cared for somewhere deep in these mountains. But the silence was unnerving. If someone had rescued her, Why hadn't they notified the authorities? Why not take her to a hospital? Could the rescuer be hiding, out of fear of getting involved? Or were they simply too poor? Or perhaps they didn't even know who she was? One question piled onto another, but Hung refused to let doubt slow him down. They continued downstream, mapping every segment, knocking on doors of scattered homes at the forest's edge. Every stone step, every tree root, every hidden path, they searched until exhaustion. And each time a tiny hut or distant cabin appeared through the trees, Hung's pace would quicken, his heartbeat racing with a blend of hope and dread. At the small hut on the forest's edge, after 5 long days filled with waiting and worry, a miracle finally happened. It was a still afternoon. The forest birds had grown quiet, and golden sunlight slanted through the bamboo blinds. That's when Hoai suddenly moved. At first, it was just a faint twitch of her brow, then, slowly, her eyelids fluttered open, as if they hadn't been used in days of unconsciousness. The mother, who had been boiling herbs by the hearth, turned around. Her eyes widened, and she froze for a breathless moment. The girl was trying to wake up. My child, she's awake." Her trembling cry rang out, and the son, who was chopping firewood outside, dropped the blade and ran in. They both knelt beside the fragile body lying on the bamboo bed. Hoai's eyes were open now, unfocused and clouded with confusion. She turned her head weakly, dry lips parting, but no sound emerged. The woman gently lifted her up and whispered, "What's your name, dear? Where are you from?" Hoai simply stared back, then slowly shook her head. Her face was pale, her eyes lost and disoriented. Suddenly, she began to tremble. The sound of running water outside the hut reached her ears, and she clutched her head, grimacing in pain as a sharp migraine surged through her skull. The trauma in her brain was far from healed, and her memory was gone. She didn't know who she was, where she was, or why her body was covered in bruises and cuts. The mother and son looked at each other, hearts tangled in silent knots. They didn't know what else to ask, only that this girl had come back from the brink of death, and now lay before them as fragile as a sprout breaking through parched soil. The following morning, after staying up all night watching over her, afraid she might relapse, the young man decided it was time to report the matter. He rode his bicycle along the mountain path to the commune office. There, he told the village chief everything, from discovering the girl by the stream, to bringing her home, nursing her for 5 days, and now watching her awaken with no memory. The chief frowned, clearly displeased. "Why didn't you report this sooner? Saving a life is good, but what if she's tied to a criminal case? We've been coordinating a missing person search for days, and now this." Still, after hearing the full story of their poverty, and learning how they had even considered selling their only cow to save the girl, the chief softened. He sighed and spoke in a gentler tone. "All right. I'll inform the authorities immediately. If she is the person they're looking for, someone will come forward soon. For now, she can stay with you, but monitor her closely. If she remembers anything, her name, her home, anything at all, you must report it immediately. Understood?" The young man nodded. Though a part of him still felt unsettled, a small weight had been lifted from his chest. On the ride home, he kept glancing over his shoulder toward the hills, where the old stream and the hut were sheltering a piece of someone's stolen memory. Back at home, his mother was feeding Hoai porridge. She ate slowly, every spoonful requiring gentle encouragement before she could swallow. Her face remained pale, her gaze empty, like a child untouched by the world beyond. And yet, she was alive. And there, beside her, were 2 strangers, poor, humble, but kind, offering refuge to a shattered soul still wandering her way back to herself. Will Hoai slowly recover the memories buried deep within her after the trauma? Will the image of Hùng, the man who once protected her with his very life, and the innocent laughter of baby Tony, begin to emerge through her blurred dreams, gently guiding her back to the home that still waits for her? Or will it be Hùng and Du, driven by instinct and an unwavering love, who finally trace her steps, through an old fishing basket, a child's fragmented words, or a single faint clue left behind on the riverbank? Through every heavy footstep in the deep forest, every sleepless night at the lonely station, Hùng holds on to one belief. She is still alive. And she is waiting to be found. But the line between hope and despair is wearing thin. Because if the current had truly swept her away, then why has no body been found? Or perhaps fate has led her down a different path, one no one ever thought to search. Back in the little hut by the stream, the girl with no memory sits quietly by the window each day, eyes gazing toward the water, heart stirring with an ache she cannot name. In the dead of night, she often wakes suddenly, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, haunted by a single word echoing from the depths of her mind. Tony. Is her memory gently returning? Are the doors of her past slowly creaking open, beckoning her home? Could a familiar voice, a tiny keepsake, be the key to awaken a love once lost to the shadows? And then, on a sudden rainy afternoon, as the faint sound of a police siren echoes from afar, Hoai's foster mother gently strokes her hair, then turns toward the door. A strange vehicle is approaching. A man steps out, his raincoat soaked, his eyes steady but stormed with emotion. Could this be the moment their long-lost paths finally cross again? Or is there still one final test waiting, before destiny seals the fate of a love that refuses to surrender? The answers remain unknown. Stay tuned for the next episode, to witness the emotional reunion between lost and found, darkness and light, where one final flicker of hope begins to shine through.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Cảm ơn mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện tình yêu của mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoài Ca và cảnh sát Hùng. Như mọi người cũng đã biết thì trong tập này mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoài Ca đã tỉnh lại, nhưng trí nhớ của cô thì chưa có thể nhớ ra được ai hết. Do va đập quá mạnh ở đầu bị thương nên là cô đang bị mất trí nhớ. Hiện tại thì Hùng thì cũng đã có manh mối về Hoài Ca nhiều hơn rồi, nhưng mà anh cũng chưa xác định được Hoài Ca là có còn sống hay là đã mất, và cũng đang trong quá trình tìm kiếm và hy vọng. Vậy liệu tình yêu có thể dẫn lối họ trở về bên nhau hay không, và sẽ chuyển biến như thế nào thì mời mọi người đón xem trong những tập tiếp theo nha. Mọi người cũng hay hỏi mình là sao không làm đến nội dung gần nhất, thì mình muốn truyền tải toàn bộ câu chuyện đến mọi người, nên là mình sẽ làm theo trình tự để mọi người có thể xem và hiểu được trình tự của câu chuyện nha mọi người.